Welcome to this video. I will take you through the process of retrieving data from Mysql using PHP. I hope you will find it useful. This is the database that we worked with in the previous video. We call it My Company, and it has one table called customer with ID, name, and phone number. So we'll be connecting to this database and retrieving any data that we may have. This section we know from the previous video. These are the parameters or variables we use to store our server data: the name of the server, the username, password, and the database name. Again, this line is not new for us. It's the line that create an object to connect to the database using the parameters we set up above. So this will be used later to communicate to the database. So $con is our object that create the connection to the database. This line will validate the connection. So if there is any error coming from the connection, it will produce an error in the screen telling the user cannot connect database. And that can be for many reasons, like for example, the server is down, or the username or the password is wrong, or the database name is not correct. In that case, you will get an error on the screen. Similar thing to what we did in the previous video. Now we need to create an SQL statement, and our SQL statement will be very basic select statement. The statement is select star from customer. We're using star because we want to retrieve all the different columns or fields that are in the database. This line now will run the SQL statement or run the query, retrieve the data, and store the result in the object $result. So this object $result is the one that will contain the data we retrieved from the database. Here we are passing the SQL statement that we created on the top to the function query of our connectivity object $connect. So this line, using the previous connection we created, run a query and pass the SQL, then get the data and store it into result. Now we have the data stored into the results, so we need to display it on the screen. So one way to do that, you create a table. So here this line will creating a table. That's normal HTML, but we running it within the PHP. So we're using echo to create the table. As we always do with the table, the first thing we do a row, and the row will have the headers of the table. So this line will create the row and close the row at the end. So the first line will be our header. In the header, we will have the ID, the name, and the phone. So these should be between a tag opening th and closing th for ID, opening th and closing th for the name, and continue like that. So this will create for us the first line, which has ID, name, and phone with no data. And the data should come in the line below. It depends on how much data we have there. It will be displayed, which we will look at it in the next line. Now we should check first if there is any data into the result. Does the result contain any data? And this line do that. So if result number of rows more than 0, that means there are data stored into that table. Then do the next line. So we're using the result to check the number of records or rows. Row here is a record, means first data row, second data row, and so on. So If there is data into the table, then we need to go through this data one by one, from the beginning of the data to the end. So this is why we need a while loop. The while loop will do that for us. The while loop will run and store each record in a variable called $row. So we choose this name. We can call it any other name, but this is the one that will have the data of every row, one by one. Every time the loop runs is the first row, second time the second row, and so on until the end of the table. To get the data and store it in row, the while loop is using result, which has the whole data for all rows. See, row, $row is a single row, but results has the data for all rows. So we're going one by one in the result and taking row by row and then displaying the data. So while $row equal result, and then fetch associate. That's the method is used to get the data from the results. In summary, the while loop fetch the data from results and store it row by row in the variable $row. This line is very important, which you'll have it in every PHP you create that retrieve data from a database, because basically that's the method. You go through the whole data row by row and then display it in the screen. So these two lines one will start a row, a table row, and the other one will close the table row. So we'll get the record. So every time this is repeated for the first row, for the second row, so you'll get the data in a table line after line. To display the first column, which is the ID, then you create a TD, echo TD, and then $row, the big bracket, quotation ID. The ID here is matching the ID into our database. So we getting from the loop or the while loop, the first row, and then fetching data from that first row and looking for ID. This ID is the same ID we have on our database. So spelling should be exactly the same because you're referring to the database. The same thing for the name, and the same thing for the phone number. In case the result of the if statement there that check the number of row in the table that more than 0, if the result of that is false, and then we'll use the else statement and then say there are no results into the table. So this echo statement will say 0 results. It's important because you don't want the user to get a screen with nothing there and doesn't know what's happening. Maybe did not connect to the database. So it's important to tell the user there is no result into your table. We need to close the table, so we have done everything. So we just end the table tag by /table. So now we need to close our connection because we retrieved data, we displayed it in the screen, and now time to close the connection. And this line, as you know from the previous video, will close the connection. I think it's getting clear for you how to connect database, retrieve data, and display it on the screen for the user. The next thing for you, you need to find a way to improve the table by using maybe Bootstrap or other CSS3 formatting, and also you need to find out how you edit a single row. You want to change the name or the ID or the phone number, how you do that, and then the last, how you delete it. So that will be the next thing we'll do in the coming videos. Thank you for watching.